Welcome to the Really Know Your Customer podcast with your hosts, Betsy Westhafer and Tony Bodoh. Join Betsy and Tony as they dive in with highly successful C-suite leaders who have grown successful organizations by creating a laser focus on listening to their customers and building deep customer relationships. Now, it's time to join Betsy and Tony for the Really Know Your Customer show.
Hi, and welcome to the Really Know Your Customer podcast. I'm Tony Bodoh.
And I'm Betsy Westhafer. We're really glad to have you here today.
Betsy, I'm really excited about this interview because we have Sirous Wadia with us, and he has done some pretty amazing things in his career. He's been in software. He's been in software as a service. He's been in customer success, and now he's taking customer success to an entirely new area. And I can't wait to talk about this and dig in deeper.
Yeah, Tony, I was so excited when Sirous and I connected and finding out, I did not know this, but finding out that there is a practice leader for customer success in a private equity firm. And I find that to be extraordinarily exciting because these companies may or may not have that expertise, and to have somebody that does to support them as they're growing past their scale up phase is really, really exciting. So without further ado, welcome, Sirous. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you, Betsy. Thank you, Tony. Appreciate the invitation.
Yeah. So can you just kind of kick us off for our audience that may not be familiar with how private equity works and the kind of the vernacular around those things, and also tell us about your company, K1 Capital, and just kind of walk us through what your world looks like.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the relationship private equity, we approach, when we invest in companies, with the notion and the thought that we're going to partner with the companies that we invest in and ultimately work with to get them to another level. They're already on a path of greatness. They are largely and almost entirely super innovative in mostly non-saturated spaces. K1 specifically plays in a sort of the smaller cap, high growth. We have certain revenue targets that we specialize in. And we really, when we approach these companies, we do all our sourcing and our diligence and our execution and all the operations within the K1 roof. All one operation, incredibly seasoned, very experienced, high knowledge folks that sort of run these different departments. And the notion is sort of in contrast to venture capital. When we invest in a company, we are with them on day one and throughout the entire journey until whatever that end sort of exit or story is. And we partner with the leaders within the organization, enable them with whatever expertise, knowledge, people, and resources we have to make them as successful as possible. So in that way, we are partners in every sense of the word, and really, again, try to take the best practices, the winning ways that we've seen some of the other portcos in our family have seen, bring that and shine a light on that, if it's applicable, and go from there.
So with Portco, you're talking about the portfolio companies that you have invested in, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then when you say in an unsaturated market, can you give us some examples of what that is, what markets those might be?
Yeah, so markets that are not, if you look at some of those, I can't remember the name of the forum, but basically where all the marketing and advertising technologies live, there are so many different players in their different niches. We are just that. We are more niche based, not exotic necessarily, but just also not living in a land where there are, 5,000 or 6,000 other players trying to grab, small shares of the pie. So, when it comes to program management, when it comes to fundraising technology, when it comes to things of that nature, we have a footprint across the board, and we really help other enterprises. We are exclusively business to business, and we are exclusively SaaS, so software as a service. And with those two sort of fundamentals in mind, we go after areas that help other businesses grow and optimize and really augment the rest of their business.
So you said a couple key words there, and I recognize them from your quick bio that I put out there. It wasn't even a bio, just a mention here. So you've got software as a service, you've got customer success, and you were in the software industry. So give us a little background of who you are and kind of your pathway here, because I know customer success didn't exist when you and I both started out in this, in the world of business.
Oh, yeah.
And we've both emerged into it, Betsy, the same way. So how did you get here?
Yeah, Tony, great question. And it wasn't a traditional sort of road. I went to my undergrad. I was actually a pre-med bio major, and I had a different course and sort of thought for my life back then. Ended up going to business school in the Bay Area. And in the Bay Area, if you're going to spend any good amount of time, you're going to end up in technology. And that's what I did. Sun Microsystems was my first sort of big boy job. Spent about 5 years there and really got a taste of both the hardware and then the software side of the world. From Sun, I started getting my first taste into the post-sale customer success, account management at the time, side of the house with VMware. VMware, when it was still a pup back in sort of the 2006, 2007 timeframe, I joined and had exposure and a hand in enabling sellers and post-sale enablers and account managers to do their business. And it really opened my eyes as to the sort of how fun and how important keeping customers happy, growing them and retaining them can be. Oh, and by the way, how profitable that endeavor is when done right. So that's sort of how it started, Tony. And I really cut my teeth at a company called Marine Software back in 2008. They are a paid search management platform, and at the time was the largest in town. In 2008, I was the first post-sale resource, really. And they had folks that were moonlighting in certain ways, but dedicated account management was me. And over the course of nearly 5.5 years, built that CS team. That's where you really the bloody noses and the learnings and all of that happened. And from there, the rest is history. And that brings me to today. I most recently spent about 3 years at Adobe, which was world-class organization. I saw the other end of, not the long tail, but the big boys and how to manage those accounts.
So Sirous, when you said earlier about how, unlike venture capital, you guys are there with your portfolio companies from day one, I would imagine that there has to be a really tight relationship based in trust, because you're seeing everything they're doing, they're looking to you for help. So can you talk to us a little bit about how do you as K1 prove your ability to help them? And then how do they respond in return to say, yes, we're a company worth spending your time on?
Great question, Betsy. So I think it starts with really in the diligence phase. It starts even before they become part of the family. When we start having the conversations, building those relationships and that trust early days, or the first conversations, that's where all that happens. And the moment that everyone signs on the dotted line and we decide we're going to take the rest of this journey together, we create, these 100-day plans, very formal sort of how do we want to get out of the gates strong, and what areas can we augment your business that will sort of take that next level. And at no time do we ever sort of impose our will, for lack of a better word, or say, we've seen it this way, so of course it's going to work for sort of your business and your industry. It's very collaborative. It's very, everything's co-authored, and we bring the leadership of knowledge. We have experts. Our operations arm within K1 is big, and it's robust, and it's constantly getting better. Continuous improvement is something that we preach internally in all facets of our business. But we bring that from the beginning. So what does that first 100 days look like? What does it look like afterwards across the spectrum, Betsy? So, from top of the funnel sales, clear through renewal, advocacy, retention of a business. And we have, there are folks like me, I have counterparts that own different parts of that customer journey. And we engage as needed. Not every new sort of acquisition is going to need sort of my 2 cents, early days. It may down the road, but maybe not front. And there may be other needs. And that's how we sort of do a diagnosis and assess, and the diligence really comes into play at that point.
So as you're helping these companies both keep and grow their existing customers, as well as going out there and acquiring new customers in the B2B SaaS space, I mean, companies fail all the time here.
Mm-hmm.
What really, in your mind, what are some of the keys that really set apart the successful companies, both at K1 and potentially elsewhere?
Yeah, no, Tony, that's sort of the $1 million question, right? So I think number one, it's not to just have checkboxes in terms of processes, not to have a generic customer journey that is not based on thoughtful engagement with your customers, internal stakeholders. So really, it's the fundamentals. Do we have a customer journey mapping analysis? Those key milestones, are we smart and thoughtful about the KPIs per stage, whether it's onboarding, support, advocacy, enablement, adoption, what matters most? And only applying those activities that move the needle and in the customer's eyes, that are value in the customer's eyes. That sort of gets thrown by the wayside when things get crazy, the bullets are flying, it's COVID, it's things are just topsy-turvy. Sometimes that discipline goes away. So it's staying true to that, I think, is the first thing. I also am a believer that every engagement needs to be humanized. So whether it is a retention marketing communication that you're trying to convey an important use case or a piece of functionality, or it's a strategic business review, right? Or it's a whatever touch point, those need to be human to human. It needs to be nothing generic. It needs to be pointed to what they care about. There has to be a high level of EQ, especially today where we're so removed from that in-person sort of energy and rapport, and all of that is not there, and who knows when that's coming back. So in this new world, and I'm sort of taking your question, Tony, to even the next sort of phase, which is we need to think about that 100 times more than we did before. I think, yeah. So I think those are the things that set us up. I also believe that the teams and the companies that are strategic about optimizing technology-led engagement beyond just the SMB, traditionally, unmanaged, longer tail customers get the tech touch love. I believe that the most innovative, forward-thinking, and ultimately successfully profitable companies are the ones that take that same technology and treat it as a friend to the higher tier, more strategic customers, because it can bring so much value. And oh, by the way, not every customer feels like they need a phone call or a human engagement. A lot of customers, if you've ever read The Effortless Experience, Matt Dixon is famous for this, right? Like the data says otherwise, right? There are people that actually want just to have the digital touch. So I think it's a lot of it. There's a lot more, but I'll stop there. But those are some of the key elements.
So for anybody watching the podcast on video, it would be wise to go back a few seconds and watch Tony's face light up when Sirous said human to human, because that is a big key part of what Tony talks about. We talk about that in our book. It's such an important thing. And even if someone doesn't want a phone call, that's still that human, you're respecting them as a human, that's their preference. So even if they don't want to engage so much other than digital, that's still respecting their preferences as a person. So I'm really glad you brought that up. And Tony always says that it's not really B2B, it's really person to person, human to human. And that's such an important aspect. So speaking of that, now in the world of COVID,
yep.
How has that impacted your portfolio companies? How has it impacted K1? What do you see moving forward? How are you addressing these things?
Yeah, Betsy, great question. I think, for the businesses that we work with and just in general, the world of B2B, not B2B, I'd say the business that we work with, largely highly disciplined, mission-driven companies that are mission critical to their customers. So I'd say everyone's been impacted in some way, but I think that we are, we're going the course, we're doing what we need to do, COVID or not. So I think that has been a benefit. I think a big reason for that, Betsy, is because, when COVID early days was coming about and we knew that this is going to be a different world, the focus to optimize and learn, how do you virtually conduct an onboarding? How do you virtually optimize and crush a customer advisory board meeting? How do you, conduct all those different sort of investing in it now, learning, and then starting to roll it out versus, oh, wow, I'm just going to get them out there. There's no real thought or upfront investment into being the best at that. We did that early. And I think it's showing dividends. So, it's crazy. I mean, right now it's a lot of forecasting and making sure we're good on the forecasting. There's no surprises in terms of churn or revenue. So all those things we are hyper vigilant about. Our operations arms everyone's antennas are up. Their sleeves are rolled up, and the army is really helping our portcos in every facet. Staff augmentation in areas that they need some extra help to just push across the line, or just expertise in maturity modeling. Something that in this age value is different today than it was 6 months ago in the eyes of the customer. So these things that we help with, but it's really helping our customers and get through the storm. Our portcos.
And I happen to know from previous conversations that you have an upcoming quarterly summit that has always historically been done in person. Yep. And now this one's going to be virtual. So how are you going about making that switch from something that was the in-person relationship development, all of that kind of thing, to a virtual event?
Well, it starts with partnering with amazing folks like you to make it a success. Betsy, it's one where we look for engaging keynotes, engaging portco leaders that have an incredible story to tell. Because when it's not at a fancy resort and we don't have the networking opportunities and all the other sort of signals and stimuli that keeps us there and engaged, we have to have the content and the viewership being driven by compelling messaging, compelling speakers. That's what we bring, right? That's how it's been different. Not to say that our live shows haven't had compelling speakers and presentation, of course. But in this environment, it's crisp. It's much more succinct in terms of the time allotment we have. The storyboard is much more like hard hitting. What are we trying to leave you to take home tonight and put in practice tomorrow? Theory's been stripped away largely, right? It's all practicality. And really our speakers they're doing it. Like they're fighting the fight in the middle of everything that's happening, just like everyone else. And they're they're all friends of K1, and they're all so willing to lower their guard and say, this is what we're doing, and some of the names and companies are just, I'm so blessed and appreciative of that, their participation.
I have 10 more questions I want to ask, but I know I won't get through them all.
Bring it, Tony.
So let's, I think it's interesting. So what you just talked about, the switch to this virtual environment, onboarding your virtual summit you have coming up, in a lot of things I've been looking at with Betsy, e-commerce is ahead by 5 years by some estimates. I mean, we're looking at a very interesting holiday season coming up here. We can see that healthcare has moved by at least 5 years forward, if not more, as telehealth is even more than that. What would you say has happened in your space, especially in the SaaS space there? How far ahead have they moved by being forced to go virtual, which we probably would have been there anyway at some point, and it was probably on your plan maybe 3 to 5 years out? I don't know. Where was that? Where was that in your mindset?
It's so much, to your point, is accelerated because of what's happening. And I think, the notion of being even so much more efficient because of what we're forced to do, it's ultimately going to benefit all of us. And so, I mentioned earlier, learning now how to conduct the best virtual implementation or CAB, it's better now, realize that efficiency and how much better the quality can be even, later. That's all sped up, and I think this notion of product-led growth, right, which is actually a session at our upcoming summit, which is having the product itself, the interactions of customer success with the customers, not just find its way into a product manager where it's now on the roadmap for a feature ad, but truly foundational in the product. So the product itself serves as a renewal engine, as a growth engine, and really the CS team has almost a different role. right? All that is being accelerated. It's been talked about previously, but now a lot of companies are just like, we have no other choice. If we're going to survive, we have to get really good at this. Support organizations are becoming more nimble. They're becoming much more aligned with the CS teams, with implementation, with product. That's the other thing, Tony, is alignment. The alignment between post-sale, sales, product and customer success, like never before I've seen in my career, is really we're at that inflection point now. All great things, honestly. And it's a shame that it's this environment that's causing this, but it's always some sort of event that causes change. And this happens to be it.
You know, when you were talking about alignment, one of the things that we talk about with customer advisory boards is how the executive team has to be aligned before they walk into a boardroom with their customers, boardroom or Zoom room, whatever the case may be. But that alignment has to be there. And so that process, much like, you know, COVID has forced a process for alignment between sales and customer success, that process of preparing for a customer advisory board also forces alignment amongst the executive team, because the worst thing that you can do is get in front of all your customers and look like the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing, or that there's conflict or disagreement amongst the leadership. So I think your point about alignment is really well taken.
I agree, Betsy. And I'll say one other thing is, in this environment where folks are in different parts of the world, certainly different cities or homes and not in the same office, the executive alignment is now, I'm seeing, so much more critical than it was even before, because once you have that on a regular cadence, that's not opportunistic, it's not reactive, it is a prescriptive, forward-looking engagement. To combine that with the teams on the ground, the account teams, practitioners, with the customer success teams, making sure that ecosystem is in concert. It's never been more important as it is now. And right now I'm seeing a lot more variance in the sentiments and the different goals and who's doing what, the left hand, right hand, like that notion you just mentioned, Betsy. So much more important, that alignment today, more than I've ever seen previous.
It's fascinating to me as you go through this, because now what I'm thinking is, if we've accelerated the pace to what we were planning to do sometime in the future, what does the 3 to 5 year plan look like now for a lot of these companies? I mean, it used to be very, at least, you know, in the world that I've been in, very iterative, like, okay, let's add another year on the 3 to 5 year plan. Well, if we just suddenly accelerated the 3 to 5 year plan, now we got to come up with a brand new one from scratch in a whole new world that we're learning. So tactically, we're trying to solve the problem in the moment. Strategically, we're trying to look forward and imagine what could be possible when none of us, you know, gradually came through and evolved into where we are today. It was thrown upon us. So how are you guys thinking about that? How are your companies thinking about that?
We're thinking about that in the form of value and redefining what that means. You know, historically, you know, are our customers using our product a lot every day? Are they logging in every day? You know, our support ticket volumes down, our time to resolution, time to value and onboarding, very important and sort of ubiquitous metrics that we all sort of think about and use. I think the fundamental shift is, what does it really mean for our customer? So a customer really wants to know, am I going to dominate my space against my competitors more so because I'm now engaged with this vendor or this partner than I was otherwise? Like, is this partnership going to get me ahead? And so things like formal and sophisticated maturity assessments and modeling and actioning off that, a curated plan to get your customer to become, you know, a number one in their space, that's value. And I know we talk about it, but like, if you don't have some semblance of, especially for your tier one, you have to have some version of that. You have to think about, you know, how do you co-author innovations and go-to-market strategies with your top customers, you know, and your more strategic customers. That's why, Betsy, to your point earlier, executive alignment, right? It's not just talking about product roadmaps. It's how do we get together and co-market together and become partners in every sense of the word. So this is, I mean, truly, if you're going to differentiate, the new 3 to 5 year plan is, how do we build toward that? Not just optimizing usage, utilization, and onboarding times, things like that, all important that we still got to do, don't get me wrong, but the game has changed. And I think that's part of it.
Tony, I know you have other questions you're chomping at the bit to ask, so I'm going to defer over to you.
No, this has been really interesting. There's a couple things that you said earlier that I want to kind of go back to. You use the word repeatedly, thoughtful. You use the word discipline. Those two things really stand out as what we hear a lot in business school. We hear a lot in Harvard Business Review, right? We hear it all over. But I get the sense, and this is just kind of me picking up the energy you've got around those words, that it's more than just words for you guys. There's something deeper there. So what does that mean, being thoughtful and being disciplined?
It means not to do something, not to take the quickest path toward completing an initiative or a deliverable to address a gap. There are different paths, and a lot of companies, especially when the stress is on and when there's so many competing pressures and initiatives and priorities, what's the quickest way? And believe me, I'm a big fan of fail fast, do things efficiently. That's how we become profitable. But I think there's a way of doing it where you introduce just the tried and true, right? And to get you to sort of the sexy and new, right? That's how I sort of think about it. There's a way of taking what others have done that works, doing it for your business in a way that's going to stick, and it's repeatable and it's predictable. And from there, you build onto the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. That's the thoughtful approach. Crawl, walk, run. But with always an eye toward every phase is it won't break. It won't be compromised because an outlying circumstance exposed some fundamental flaw that you hadn't thought about. That's what I mean about thoughtful. So if you have a business review as probably a bad tactical example, but if you think about what is my story, when I walk into an executive review with my customer, who is my audience? What's my story? And that story will be like completely indestructible, irregardless of who's in the room. The most technical minded person or the most business minded person or any sort of in between, I'm going to have a story that's going to speak to all of them. Like, that's being thoughtful, not just walking in and saying, all right, so here's, if anybody's done a business review, you know the agenda, right? What did we do last 90 days? What are we doing today? What's forward looking? A little bit of product roadmap. No, I mean, there are just so many ways of changing the game. That's what I mean. And the discipline is not to stray. Know the best practices, know what you're trying to accomplish, and don't get distracted by a competing priority that maybe just popped its head up. There are ways to account for driving your core business forward down the path you want. And Tony, to steal the phrase from you, that 3 to 5 year plan, don't stray. I mean, keep marching and then account for everything as it comes along. That's the discipline and the thoughtfulness that I was talking about.
Now, do you find that you bring that to the companies, or do the companies that you're vetting before you invest in them already have a level of that thoughtfulness and discipline?
I think in their core, they do. I mean, we invest as much into the leadership and the people as much as we do in the technology, and so it's really a marriage of both. But I think what we do is we layer on the benefit of working across so many different companies and seeing so much that works and doesn't work, and curating, here's the best of what we got. This is what we saw in this particular area that you have need, and here's the best version that we can bring. That's like thoughtfulness, at its peak, in my opinion. And it takes someone with high an appetite to work with someone and say, you know what, I don't have all the answers. And K1 partnering with them, what a blessing, because they have purview that's not behind some ivory walls, but really in practice. And they're going to bring that to us. So that's the layer that we can bring. And the discipline is, we measure everything. Everything is a quantifiable event. And if we can't measure direct impact, we won't do it. I mean, there are things that we'll always do to help and be helpful. But if we're not driving bottom line results and making sure that we're driving value for the portco, with the portco, it won't serve anyone any good. So that's a discipline that we bring as well. The accountability.
Sirous, this conversation has just been absolutely fascinating. And I love kind of humanizing private equity and talking about thoughtfulness and discipline and the human to human touch and all of that. I just think this has been very enlightening for our audience, to be sure. Switching gears a little bit, one of the things that we love to do on our show is ask our guests, is there a community organization or a nonprofit charity that you personally have an affinity for or your organization does? And we'd love to hear about it. Just kind of shine a little spotlight on them. I think the world can use a lot of focus on the organizations that are doing good things for the world. So just want to give you the opportunity to give a shout out.
Thank you, Betsy. I appreciate that. And I'm going to be very quick, but to the point. Personally, I am part of a group called the Good City Mentors. Good City Mentors, they are a nonprofit here in the greater Los Angeles area. And we work with all sort of I don't want to say inner city, but sort of lower served high schools within the area, largely minority driven, largely in poor areas that sometimes are just challenged, and we bring a layer of friendship and knowledge and just availability, and we actually work with students on a weekly basis and so Good City Mentors is something I have a lot of love for. It's only in LA now, but they're growing into the state and nationally down the road. So check them out online if you get a chance. And then just a quick shout out for my own K1 family. We have taken it on such, it's such a personal item for us to contribute to inclusion and bringing diversity to all our portcos, to our boardrooms, to all the communities that we serve. So we actually have formal metrics that we have instilled within our family to make sure that there's equality amongst our own family portcos as well. I'm so proud of us and the folks within the K1 that are doing that. So thank you for that, Betsy.
Oh yeah, no, thank you. And we'll be sure to put a link to the organization that you mentioned. Tell me the name again.
Good City Mentors.
Good City Mentors. And we'll put a link in our show notes so that people can go check it out.
Thank you, Betsy. Appreciate that.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much for being here, Sirous. This was very, very enlightening and always good to talk to you. And we really appreciate your time. I know that you mentioned that you're actually not in the country right now. So we really appreciate you taking time out of your travel schedule to sit and have this conversation with us.
Always a pleasure. I appreciate both of you, Betsy, Tony. Thank you again.
Betsy, this conversation with Sirous was truly amazing to me because we're now in this phase where COVID has been with us for so long that people are really rethinking business as a whole. They're not just saying, hey, we're going to be out of this in 2 months or 6 weeks. They recognize that business is different and we have to rethink everything. So the level of efficiency, of effectiveness that he talked about, the thoughtful, disciplined approaches, these things stick out to me as just a way that we have to be doing business, and how you engage your customers and how you get to really know your customers by that thoughtful discipline. And I like the word co-authoring, which you use so often, co-authoring the strategy, co-authoring the product. All of that makes so much sense. And we've literally in this conversation, I think, seen the future, maybe seen the present and into the future of what customer engagement really is going to be over the next few years.
Yeah, I agree. He made so many good points. It's hard to pick out just a couple that really, resonated the most because they all did. But I think one of the other things that I really appreciated about what he said was just how much this is about people and the human connection. And, you think about Silicon Valley and venture capital and private equity and SaaS companies, and it's not the first thing that comes to mind is, they really need to have emotional intelligence and they need to have this connection with their customers. And so to me, that's a really exciting shift in the way that K1 looks at what they do versus other PE firms and venture firms that I've been in contact with, where, it's mostly just a money game, and so I'm very encouraged to see that shift that's happening in the world of private equity.
I agree. And to see what they're doing, Sirous is not just influencing his company. He's having this ripple effect in all of their portcos, and that's going to have a ripple effect into the clients of those portcos, and it's going to have a ripple effect that has an impact on the industry as a whole. And that's one of the things I'm really excited to see is like we're at the beginning of a wave. We're seeing those first, the first bit of energy flowing, and we're going to see this rise up into a tidal wave, and it's going to take over the way things have been done because we can't do them the way they used to be done, or we're going to go out of business.
Agreed. And I can't add a better way to end this conversation than that point you just made, Tony. So thank you, Tony. Always a pleasure doing this show with you. And thank you to our audience for being loyal listeners. We're very excited to have you here. And if you want to share our podcast, go to your favorite podcast platform and just subscribe, let people know about it. We really appreciate the support that we've gotten. We, just as a little sidebar, we have gotten such great feedback, and we really appreciate that from our listeners who have given us feedback that help us get better. And we want to continue doing this show for as far as the eye can see. And we've really gotten some very encouraging feedback. So thank you to our listeners who take the time to let us know what they think. And until the next time, we'll see you on the Really Know Your Customer podcast.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Really Know Your Customer. We hope you gained a lot of value from being here today. If you want to learn more about the work Betsy and Tony do to help their clients thrive, visit Betsy at thecongruitygroup.com and Tony at tonybodoh.com. See you next time on the Really Know Your Customer show.